Coming up on Network Africa, Prime Minister of Eswatini, Ambrose Dlamini, who tested positive for COVID-19 4 weeks ago, dies at the age of 52. The Central African Republic says the COVID-19 pandemic is under control thanks to early measures enforced by the government. Plus, Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed visits Mekelle, the capital of TIGRAY, for the first time since ordering military offensive against the region. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin this week with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
Several hours after hundreds of students of the Government Science Secondary School Kankara were kidnapped in Katsina State, Nigeria, some parents of the missing children staged a protest to demand government's intervention to help rescue them.
The government is the only one that will help us because they are the ones who have the strength and authority to rescue our children.
The incident has generated a lot of reaction, with government authorities suggesting that hundreds of the boys are still missing. President Muhammadu Buhari, who condemned the attack in his home state of Katsina, said in a statement that the military had located and exchanged fire with the kidnappers in the forest and were being aided by air support. Locals in the area say the gang, armed with AK-47s, stormed the school in Kankara district at about 9:40 p.m. on Friday. Elsewhere, Sudan's Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok arrived in Ethiopia on Sunday with what a senior Sudanese government source said was an offer to mediate in the conflict in its northern Tigray region, a proposal Ethiopia's government dismissed as unnecessary. Hamdok, who was accompanied by Sudanese security officials, also planned during his two-day visit to present his country's concerns about threats to its security along its border with Tigray. The previous day, the first non-governmental aid convoy since fighting began on November the 4th arrived in the capital of Ethiopia's northern region of Tigray, carrying desperately needed medicines and other items.
The contingents are basically those of the Ethiopian Red Cross and the ICRC, and hoping that we get them as soon as possible to the health workers that really require this assistance as part of their action and contribution towards their communities.
Nearly 50,000 refugees have crossed into eastern Sudan since early November. And Egypt has received the first batch of Chinese anti-coronavirus vaccine to help the country's fight against the COVID-19 epidemic. Egyptian Minister of Health and Population, Hala Zayed, said it's a historic day to receive the first air shipments of the vaccine. According to the official, the batch of the vaccine, developed by China's state-owned Sinopharm pharmaceutical firm, came from the United Arab Emirates.
The government of Eswatini says Prime Minister Ambrose Dlamini has died 4 weeks after he tested positive for coronavirus. A government statement says the 52-year-old died on Sunday afternoon at a hospital in South Africa. No cause of death was mentioned, but Dlamini had recently been receiving treatment for COVID-19 in South Africa. He had been Prime Minister of Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland, since October 2018. The tiny landlocked country in southern Africa is one of the last absolute monarchies in the world. Well, South Africa's Northwest Province's Department of Education is investigating how a trip for final year students that left 3 people dead was approved. The students who had completed their matric examinations at Retu Segile Secondary School were traveling back from a trip in Brits when Their vehicle was involved in a road accident. The students were reportedly coming from a resort to celebrate the end of their secondary school exams. 3 of the students are said to have died on the spot, while 7 others were injured and taken to the hospital. School trips had been banned and only educational ones were to be approved by the Educational Department. Meanwhile, South African government is cautioning its citizens on international travel as a number of countries, including South Africa, are experiencing a second wave of the coronavirus pandemic. According to the Minister for International Relations and Cooperation, Naledi Pandor, since the beginning of a hard lockdown in March this year, the department had to repatriate over 30,000 South Africans who were stranded from all corners of the world using 350 flights. Mrs. Pandor was speaking to the media today in Pretoria, South Africa's capital, where she advised the people on measures to take to avoid being stranded abroad.
Countries in the Northern Hemisphere are encountering a second wave of the pandemic. South Africans should be cautious in traveling to these countries, as you may become distressed or even destitute abroad, depending on the levels of lockdown in the respective countries and with the likelihood of international flights that might be cancelled at short notice. Please do be aware that if you do travel, you travel at your own risk to these countries, knowing the current circumstances and the uncertainty associated with that. Please ensure that you are familiar with the immigration and health entry requirements of the country you will visit and South Africa's entry health requirements during the pandemic. If you have any uncertainty regarding the entry health requirements of the country you will be visiting, then please do contact their embassy in South Africa for assistance. If you need any clarity on the health entry requirements upon your return to South Africa, we ask you to consult the website of the Department of Health.
Well, we'll be having more later on the developments in South Africa. But in the meantime, in the Central African Republic, the government says the COVID-19 pandemic seems to be generally under control. Now, that's according to Francois Luceni Fall. He's the head of the United Nations Regional Office for Central Africa. He says the containment is thanks to early measures enforced by the governments to limit the spread of the virus, which are now paying a high socio-economic cost.
The pandemic seems generally under control in the sub-region, with only 13,470 active cases as of 7th December, for a total of 88,422 cases and 1,614 deaths officially reported since the beginning of the pandemic. Although in recent days, the number of infections in some countries have been on the rise again, thus delaying the lifting of some of the restrictions imposed to counter the evolution of the pandemic. The trends across Central Africa clearly indicate that the early measures enforced by the government of the sub-region to contain and reduce the propagation of the pandemic have proven effective. However, this effectiveness comes at the high socio-economic cost, as the economic slowdown triggered by the pandemic and the different restrictive measures further deplete the already limited capacity of the states to provide basic social services to their populations.
Well, away from COVID-19 stories, as outrage continues to trail last Friday night's abduction of scores of students of Government Science Secondary School Kankara in Katsina State here in Nigeria, we're getting details on the circumstances surrounding the incident. A resident of the town who did not want his identity revealed said the attack was a reprisal by the aggrieved bandits. According to him, the bandits had on Wednesday attacked Yakuka village, where they killed 12 people and abducted unspecified number of others in the village. As a result, vigilante groups mobilized and went after the bandits in their hideouts on Thursday, burning their houses, injuring and killing some of them. It was gathered that this angered the bandits who on Friday night struck at Kankara and abducted the school children after shooting into the air before forcing their way into the school premises. The bandits were said to have led the students to neighboring Pawa village and from there into the nearby forest. Well, let's now go back to some of our main stories coming from South Africa. We have joining us now our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, for more on these stories. Hello, Betty. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we could have you now on the program.
Thank you, Laya.
Now, we were talking about the government's warning on international travel and, Minister Pandor was talking about how she wouldn't want citizens to be stranded abroad, and being stranded abroad is really not a funny thing. Does this mean South Africans are traveling out for the holidays, despite the restrictions that are in place all over the world?
Well, there are restrictions, but not restrictions to travel. People are still allowed to travel. But what I can say is the minister is basically saying you travel at your own risk. Apart from people paying their tickets the last time, about 30,000 of them, facilitating those flights to repatriate them cost government a lot of money. So she is trying to say some of the countries are experiencing their second wave, including South Africa. So people need to be cautious wherever they're going. South Africa is grappling with its own. We expect the president to speak today to see if they too may be taking some steps back. We've seen the UK, we've seen France, and more recently we've seen the announcement from Germany and very high numbers from the US. So she's trying to tell people to be cautious if they're traveling. But I know that local tourism during the holiday, because we have summer at the time there is winter in other parts of the world, is higher, local tourism, which is what they're still trying to manage within the country. And I know as well that a lot of travel is people from outside coming in, international travelers booking way ahead to be in South Africa at this time because it's warmer than where they're coming from. So she's telling people to be cautious, but there is business travel. People have been going in and out as well, but I'm not quite sure about holiday at this time from South Africa.
All right. Indeed, people need to be cautious. Now, let's speak about the Retu Segile secondary school student who unfortunately died. Quite an unfortunate incident. Is there an update on the investigation in how in the first place, this trip was approved?
Well, not really. All we know at this point is that the MEC for Education in the Northwest Province, that's where this happened, Ms. Wendy Matsomela, has said that the team has been put in place. There's a blame game going on. The pens down party, or what they call the matric rage, was organized by the school. 3 minibus taxis. We wouldn't have heard anything, but because of what happened, one of the taxis overturned and some of the pupils died. So they're going to look at who authorized the trip. That's what they're looking at now. And she said at this point, let's term it unauthorized excursion or trip to that resort that ended up in this unfortunate way. But nothing really, just grieving families. Some of the kids were, like one of them was an only child, a single mother, and the one who died as well, that's a Tsepiso. His mom said he's been failing, and this is the time that he actually managed to finish at 21, and she had so much expectation. He had expectations as well. So grieving families were waiting to see what will happen, but it's really very unfortunate.
Yeah, that is indeed really sad. Just finally, before I let you go, Eswatini also is in mourning. You know, its prime minister passed away, we understand, yesterday in the hospital in South Africa. Do we know of any plans to honor him?
Not at the moment. We just had the statement from his deputy, Temba Masuku, who said that, who announced it after being authorized by the king, of course, to tell the nation. But they're saying that they're going, guided by the family of Prime Minister Ambrose Dlamini, they will be making further announcements on what to do. But they're quite pained because he had so many plans for the country since he became prime minister, coming from the corporate world as, I think, the CEO of MTN Eswatini. So he will be sorely missed. South Africa's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, as well as the ANC, they've released statements, commiserating with the Eswatini government and the people of that country. But nothing really has come from the family, save for that statement from Mr. Masuku, the Deputy Prime Minister, who announced the death. And the reason for the death, we don't know, but we know that he tested positive to COVID. He announced it. He tested positive last month, and that he was asymptomatic and doing well, till a statement that we got a few weeks back saying he was being transferred into South Africa, where he has now died on Sunday. Yes.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Betty. Thank you, South Africa Bureau Chief there from Johannesburg. Thank you for those updates.
Thank you very much.
Well, still to come on Network Africa, the United States officially removes Sudan from a list of state sponsors of terror. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. South Africa's critical and creative clustered community projects, in partnership with organizations representing blind and visually impaired people, have marched to the seat of government, the Union Buildings, to hand over a memorandum of demands to President Cyril Ramaphosa. Among other things, they are demanding that the government should conclude the amendment of the law, which will make it possible to have written work in accessible format, and also for creatives to receive fair royalties in return for their work. This will be in line with the 2013 Marrakesh Treaty endorsed by South Africa among 90 countries.
As the world celebrated the International Human Rights Day, visually impaired persons in South Africa, joined by musicians, writers and filmmakers and educators, marched to the seat of the South African government in Pretoria. They were not celebrating. They came demanding that their right to publish work in accessible format be respected in a memorandum of demands handed to a government official from the presidency.
Within 14 days, you will get an acknowledgement from the office of the president to show that you did hand it over to the president's office.
We are here because less than 0.5% of published works is in an accessible format, that is Braille or Daisy, a large print and audio that blind and partially sighted people can access.
The Marrakesh Treaty is the latest addition to the body of international copyright treaties administered by the World Intellectual Property Organization. It facilitates access to published works for the visually impaired. They say it is illegal currently to translate material into Braille and other accessible formats, or to import Braille books into South Africa.
Clause number 19D of the Copyrights Bill of South Africa, where Braille is to be allowed to be produced from books and other material by independent publishers and authors. The president returned the bill, and the country has not signed or ratified the Marrakesh. Therefore, it has not obligate itself to then follow the new regime.
From that big issue, they raised smaller ones encountered in seeking the right information to stay safe during these COVID times.
As a blind person, you find it very difficult to apply social distancing. You need to touch somebody when you walk with them. You need to
come into contact with all kinds of different surfaces. So we are being put in more danger than other people.
When you're blind, you need somebody to hold your hand or to try to hold on to and get assistance. But now when you try and do that, people run away. And especially at shops, people don't help you anymore.
The South African Copyright Amendment Bill seeks to address the injustices the protesters feel, but it is still stuck in the South African legislative process. They have given the government until the 27th of January 2021 to ratify and amend the copyright bill, else they look to the legal options once more.
Sudan is officially off the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. According to its embassy in Khartoum, the congressional notification period of 45 days has lapsed and the Secretary of State has signed a notification stating rescission of Sudan's state sponsor of terrorism designation, which is effective from today. U.S. President Donald Trump had in October said Sudan will come off the list after it pays compensation of $335 million to victims and families of Al-Qaeda's 1998 bombing of U.S. embassies in Africa. Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok had responded by saying the funds had been transferred. Now, the country was listed in 1993 when Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden lived there as a guest of the government, and it was along with Iran, North Korea, and Syria. Well, Mohamed Alamin, a freelance reporter for the VOA in Khartoum, joins us now for more on this story. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Mohamed.
Yeah, you are welcome. Thank you.
Now, what's the mood like in the country as Sudan is officially off this list of state sponsors of terrorism amongst citizens, government officials? What are they saying?
Yes, actually, this day is very historical for Sudan. I mean, officially and popularly among the Sudanese people. The government, all the government, I mean, the head of the Sovereign Council, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok, and all the ministers in Sudan have actually commended the decision that comes after a very long time of diplomatic and political efforts by the Sudanese government. Also, the people of Sudan were suffered a lot from being blocked from the international markets and from the global financial system, including the banking transaction, etc. So the people of Sudan are today actually very inspired of this decision, and it's actually made the hopes of the Sudanese and the expectations very high of reintegration with the government. The Prime Minister also talked about that Sudan is just now rejoined the international community after a long isolation. You know, Sudan have been under these sanctions and on the list of terror for like 3 decades, and that actually blocked Sudan from a lot of things. Now Sudan is open to the international community. Sudan can benefit from the investments. Sudan can do the banking transaction normally like the other countries. And you know, Sudan has already suffered from economic crisis for a long time, and since the outset of President Omar al-Bashir, Sudan is really the economy in Sudan is really down, and need the international community, the help of the international community, and the normal flow of the investments to pick it up from the current situation.
Indeed. Now, with this latest development, it is obvious there's obviously going to be a great impact on this for future diplomatic relations, you know, with other countries and Sudan. Thank you so much, Mohamed Alamin, freelance reporter for the VOA. Thank you for speaking to us on the program. And for the first time since ordering an offensive against Tigray, Ethiopian Prime Minister has visited the capital Mekele. Mr. Abiy Ahmed attended also the first meeting of a new regional council where he met with commanders of the ENDF as well as provisional administration of Tigray. According to him, telecom and electricity are currently being restored, infrastructural works are also underway and humanitarian relief has been provided. He had earlier hosted talks with Prime Minister of Sudan, Abdallah Hamdok, to where 50,000 Tigrayan refugees have fled. Now, a Sudanese official said Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok was actually prepared to mediate in the conflict, but a statement by Mr. Abiy made no mention of any such offer, though it said the Sudanese delegation had backed his actions in Tigray. Reports also say Mr. Hamdok has now returned home early from what Ethiopia said would have been a 2-day trip. And on that note, we close Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.